use that.
Okay, you have to just mute your It's just the volume. Okay, so thanks everybody for coming to our seminar today. Welcome to those online and to those of you who have made the effort to come here in person. So today we're talking about the mental health landscape of Irish agriculture in the context of supporting farming minds. So we have Dr. Tomas Russell from UCD and Dr. Noel Richardson from SETU. So before we start, I'm just going to read a brief bio of each of our speakers. And before I start, can everybody hear me online? You can just give a thumbs up in the chat. And if you can hear, then we'll proceed. So Dr. Tomas Russell is Assistant Professor in Agricultural Extension and Innovation at the School of Agriculture and Food Science at UCD. He's Programme Director of the Masters in Agricultural Extension and Innovation, and he's also Co-Director of the UCD Agri Mental Health Group, which he'll be talking to us about today. He completed his PhD at UCD, looking at the role of agricultural extension in supporting farmer decision-making on succession and inheritance. And today he's going to be talking about the range of projects that are currently under his supervision with his group here within the school and with colleagues externally, which include Noel. Dr. Noel Richardson is Senior Lecturer and Director of the National Centre for Men's Health within the Department of Health and Sports Sciences at SETU Carlow. He has extensive experience in the area of men's health, research policy and advocacy levels. He was principal author of Ireland's National Men's Health Policy 2009 and served as a policy advisor on men's health at the Department of Health for the past 15 years. He was co-author of the first European Union report on men's health in 2011 and also collaborated on the WHO European Regional Men's Health Report and Men's Health Strategy 2018. He's published a broad range of research reports and academic papers in the area of men's health. His current research interests includes masculinities, men, mental health and suicide prevention, health promotion interventions targeted at these hard-to-reach groups, of which the farming community are a part of. He's a board member of Men's Health Forum Ireland also. So Noel, thanks very much also for taking the time to come up and be with us today. Well, you're a very impressive character, so you know. So we're really looking forward to hearing from you. Okay, so Tomas, you're just going to do your first presentation, then followed by Noel, and then we'll have Q&A at the end.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Tomas.
Thanks, Adele, and thanks everyone for joining online and face-to-face. So, as Adele said, I'm going to talk about the mental health landscape of Irish agriculture, supporting farmer minds, and delighted to have my colleague Dr. Noel Richardson here to talk to this as well. So, I'm going to talk about the work of the Agri Mental Health Group, which was set up by myself and Professor Louise McHugh from the School of Psychology into 2022, and since then we've grown substantially. We've got involved in the research projects, we've got more research funding, we've developed a big team of researchers, and important to note that these are from a number of different disciplines, from agricultural science, from psychology, and from health science, and that list and the number on that team are thankfully growing, and we have a number of that team here today. So as I said, I'm going to talk about the projects that we sort of have ongoing from this. And I suppose maybe a bit of context, this group was set up because there was lots of talk around the mental health crisis in agriculture from both an Irish and a European perspective. And we were hearing that from our farming community, both in Ireland and abroad, across Europe, but particularly as well from students who were doing the Masters in Agricultural Extension and Innovation and were working with farmers on a day-to-day basis. We're saying that they were seeing an increase in the number of farmers that were struggling with mental health difficulties. So as a result of this, we wanted to come together and get some evidence around this and see, you know, what was the issue if there was an issue and how we could address this. So this kicked off really in 2022 with our first research project called Diamond Farm, developing a suicide prevention intervention for farms in Ireland. This was funded by the HSE National Office for Suicide Prevention And they had identified in the research called that farmers were a group that they wanted some research done on. They identified them as a group that they felt were at risk in terms of mental health. So that was sort of the project that kicked off the research. We have a number of other projects, as you can see here, and I'll be touching on some of those as we go through the presentations. So projects and collaborations. As you can see, a lot of these are 2024, so we're in the midst of starting a lot of those projects and just at the very beginning. So I'll talk about the work we're going to do and then some of the work that we've done already. And you can see again the range of funders that are on this. So in terms of the mental health landscape, so where we stand in terms of agriculture, the first study that we conducted was in 2022. And I suppose the headline figure from that study was that 23.4% of 256 farmers surveyed were considered at risk of suicide. We replicated this study again in 2004, and we found that 22.8% of 457 farmers were considered at risk of suicide. I suppose this was the starting point in the headline figure that there was issues in the farming community. And when we say considered at risk for suicide, it means that they've considered suicide within the 2 weeks prior to that study or being surveyed. In terms of a comparison for the Irish population, the closest one we can get that was similar to the approach that we used was in 2018, and that was 14.6%. So we can see that it's substantially higher within the farming community. In 2024, then we asked some further questions and found that 82.1% of farmers knew someone who died by suicide. 13.8% of those were family members or a spouse or partner, and 14.6% of those were friends. So again, fairly substantial numbers when it comes to farmers and risk of suicide. I suppose this quote stands out a lot to me. This was when we released some of the findings from the research. This was the big quote that came back from the farming community, stark but not surprising. I suppose that stands out to me a lot because, again, we were hearing lots of anecdotal evidence about farmers at risk and mental health issues in the farming community. And then when we had the evidence, it was stark but not surprising. So another piece of research we have done then is with the HSE National Office for Suicide Prevention, and we have a paper that's submitted for this. And this was, they have a study, the Irish Probable Suicide Death Study, and they have a data set from 2015 to 2018, which comprised of all the coroner-determined deaths, suicides, and then research-determined suicides. So this is where they've gone through in detail all of the coroner reports to identify where something might not have been necessarily recorded as a suicide, but actually on all the balance of probabilities was a suicide. So we worked with them on looking at the farmer side of that. And what we found is that 31.5 per 100,000 probable suicides among male Irish farmers, that was compared to 23.6 per 100,000 for the non-farmer population. Again, when we look at the bottom point, those aged over 65, there was 29.2 per 100,000 versus 14.3 per 100,000 for non-farmers. So I suppose this sort of verified some of the data that we were getting in terms of the risk of suicide. We actually identified that there was, in terms of the data, while it is 2015 to 2018, we could see that there was high numbers of suicide among the farming community. So again, looking at the research in a bit more depth, we found again in 2022 and 2024 that the driver of suicidal ideation was farm stress. This is a huge driver of suicidal ideation and of lower well-being. So I suppose that gives us some insights in terms of how we can start to address the issues around farmer mental health when we focus on farm stress. We looked at the key stressors that were affecting farmers, and in 2022, out of 241 farmers, government policies designed to address climate change, outsiders not understanding the farm, and concern over the future of the farm were the top factors that were affecting or causing stress among the farming community. In 2024, slightly changed, but again, within the top 6, we had the government policies designed to address climate change. It would be no surprise that the weather was kind of number 1 there, given the year and the climate that was there. But again, the standout ones, government policies designed to address climate change, concerns over the future of the farm, and outsiders not understanding the nature of the farm. So again, this has given us valuable insights in terms of how we can work with farmers to try and address some of the issues and some of the key stressors that they're facing. And I suppose moving on from that, a really important point to note is that some of the issues given what farmers come back to us with are structural issues, and some of them are psychological issues. So in terms of the structural issues, the big thing that's coming out, particularly around the government policies and climate change, was not necessarily the policies themselves, but actually that farmers are perceived that their voice are not being included in policy. So when we're looking at these climate change policies, farmers feel that they're not being adequately heard, that there's not effective communication, and that their voices are not being included. So from a structural issue, that's a really important point to make. From a psychological issue, then we can see that farmers are using these words: regulation, succession, financial pressures, climate change, and a lot of the literature will talk about some of isolation, financial pressures. These are the terms that we hear talking to the farming community around the issues that are impacting on their mental health. But from our survey data, and this is where the value of the disciplines of health science and psychology comes in, we can really sort of dig down a bit deeper into that to figure out what are the psychological processes that are impacting, that underpin these points that we hear. And that would be sense of purpose, emotional avoidance, and sense of identity. So what we found about the farming community is that farmers have this rigid sense of identity. So, they're farmers and they get hard to think of themselves as anything else other than farmers. So anything that threatens that sense of identity, whether it is succession, financial pressures, climate change, is what having an impact on their mental health. And again, the emotional avoidance, this is probably one of the key ones for the research that we're doing. And farmers are psychologically inflexible. So, there's lots of work we can do around psychological flexibility to support that. And again, that ties into that rigid sense of identity and really, getting farmers to think of other sense of purpose other than being very focused on the farm. So building on from that, and this is just to give an example of more in-depth research that we did. So we did interviews with farmers, an anonymized farmer. These are all anonymized quotes, but it gives some sense of what we mean by we just talked about there. So one of the quotes says, "Land gets in the mind like on her own all day, thinking about it, thinking about it, thinking about it. Being a farmer is who I am." So we can see this is a good example of that attachment or that identity. Farmers are ruminating about the land all day, walking the land, thinking about the land, living on the land, and that's what sort of drives that rigid sense of identity in some respects. If you look at the media in the last couple of months, like we've been used as a scapegoat for climate change and all that. So farmers are feeling scapegoated. Again, building into that fact that farmers are feeling that their voice isn't being heard, and the media perception of outsiders not understanding agriculture. We've been nearly hit with a stick that you have to fall into place and do what you've been told to do. There's an awful disconnect from what's happening in relation to rural Ireland. So again, farmers are feeling misunderstood, and that feeds into the communication. And that having an outrageous effect on the mental health of farmers. So all of this really impacting mental health on a day-to-day basis. People are toying with our futures, so farmers are feeling that they want certain futures. And as a farmer, you're expected to get on with things as such. You're expected to be, I suppose, physically strong and mentally strong as well. So it shows the need for farmers needing support in this area. So I suppose that was a very quick overview in terms of some of the research that we've done, but then moving on to saying how can we support the farming community and what's building on the research that we've done, how can we move this forward? So I suppose one of the most important points of the research with the UCD Agri Mental Health Group is if we want to save farmers' lives, we need an evidence-based approach. And that's really what we're working on, is that all of the interventions that we develop, all of the work that we do is evidence-based. And again, it's the value of the collaboration between health sciences, psychology and agriculture that we can really start to embed evidence-based practices into the work that we're doing around interventions or the support for farmers. And I suppose looking more positively then in terms of the data that we found, there's lots of evidence to show that among the farming community, the psychological skills are associated with lesser suicidal ideation and improved well-being. So this means that there is a lot of things that we can do to support farmer mental health and to work with them. And particularly what we're working on is we're using acceptance commitment therapy, which is a type of therapy that my colleague Louise McHugh is expert in. And we're using that particularly around the area of psychological flexibility to work with farmers in terms of the interventions that we're developing. And then a study by a master's student who's part of the Agri mental health team, Paul Angle, was looking at this credible mental health speaker. And again, just showing that there are things that we can do. So, and the importance of talking about mental health. So what Paul found is that speakers who downplay farmers' mental health concerns were rated as significantly less believable, trustworthy, and credible than a middle ground stance or overemphasizing. So emphasize the importance of actually talking about mental health within the farming community, and not necessarily overemphasizing, but ensuring that we're actually actively talking about it. Because again, there's a perception in the agriculture community that, you know, we can't, it's not good to be talking about it as much or emphasizing the issue, but this shows that it is. And that there's an openness by farmers to receiving mental health advice, but they're particularly focused on receiving it from licensed mental health providers, so psychologists, doctors, or scientific family members. So, you know, there is a role there for whether it is your psychologist or your doctor actually intervening in support on it. So in terms of then the project and what we're starting to do to work on all of what I've talked about so far, one of the first ones is funded by FBD Trust and the HSE National Office for Suicide Prevention, and we're testing the feasibility and effectiveness of a scalable mental health intervention for farmers in large context. So this is focused on those farmers that we would deem at risk. So those farmers that are dealing with high stress, those farmers that are at risk of suicide. We have session protocol which has been developed and tailored for the farming community, and reviewed by clinical psychologists. So we've spent a good bit of time developing this protocol. It has been reviewed, and now currently we're doing a feasibility trial where we have 6 farmers receiving 6 one-to-one sessions, counselling sessions. One of our team members, Noel, is working on that, providing sessions to farmers. We're collecting, it's a single case high density design, so we're collecting daily data from the farmers to see actually what part of the intervention is working. Is it reducing their stress? Is it supporting them in addressing their mental health? And part of this then as well is key informant interviews with policymakers and service providers, which again is ongoing to see how can we, there's no point in developing an intervention if it's not scalable and effective and that we can work out. So it's talking to those policymakers to see what can we do and how can we make it work. We then have our So What project funded by the EPA, and this is really focused on addressing that issue around farmers' voices, farmers perceiving their voices not being heard in climate change conversations. And it's using motivational interviews to develop communication tools that will improve farmers, agricultural advisors and policymakers' understandings of each other's needs and dilemmas in relation to climate change. So using that motivational interview to understand people's needs, objectives, drivers, to really say where can we, I suppose, where can we match that issue that farmers are feeling their voice are being heard, and policymakers also are feeling that their needs are being addressed and that they're listening to farmers' needs. Again, that's just in the very early stages where we're running interviews with policymakers at the minute. We have our collaboration with MOCRA Make the Move, and MOCRA Make the Move is a program to support farmer mental health. And UCD Agri mental health team is supporting them with evidence-based training, content creation, support and evaluation. And I suppose one of the outputs of that has been the UBO, whichever way you pronounce it, which is a little notepad or a notebook for farmers that they can write notes in it, but there's also some messaging, you know, very light messaging that gets them thinking more positively. So that when there's been a few thousand copies printed and they're distributed to farmers around Ireland, and I've a copy for every mayor. But again, that we're doing all the work with what we're making in terms of ensuring that whatever they do is evidence-based. So whether it's evaluating the talks that they're doing, the training that they're doing to make sure that it's working, or to make sure that we can support them, that it's not just talks that they don't know what's happening. Because there is evidence out there to show that while there's a lot of really good mental health initiatives out there at the minute, not that many of them are evidence-based or evaluation. So they're working, they could be fantastic, but we really need to figure out what aspects are working, you know, what they're targeting, are they addressing or supporting farmers. And then our sort of final project, and I'll be handing over to Noel to talk a bit more after this, but is Farm and Minds. So this is a 4-year project funded by the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine, and it's developing evidence-based interventions to enhance farmer mental health. And this is a collaboration between UCD Ag Science, UCD Psychology and SETU and On Firm Ground, which Noel will be talking about in a few minutes. And the purpose of this study is to develop and test the feasibility of an effectiveness of a scalable psychological intervention for farmers for early intervention and prevention, particularly focused on the target areas of mental health, stress and resilience, and building on the existing framework of on-farm ground to develop evidence-based interventions that go beyond signposting to support the development of key psychological skills. So the aim of this is really focusing on the farmers, but also training advisors so that we have an intervention that advisors can roll out to support farmers with mental health. Very conscious and understanding that advisors are not counsellors or psychotherapists, but and to steal a phrase from a colleague in the UK, they're accidental counsellors in some respects, because inevitably they end up in front line in front of farmers and are dealing with some of those mental health issues. So that's the real focus of Farm Minds project, is to make sure that we have evidence-based approaches to supporting farmers in this. So with that, I'll hand over to Noel.
Hi, Paul. I suppose what really strikes me from Tomas's presentation is the breadth and depth of work that's around in this space now, which is really welcome. I remember when I was involved in developing the National Mental Health Policy in Ireland back in 2007, 8, 9 kind of time, and going to the Department of Agriculture and asking them to come on board with being responsible for certain actions in the action plan that went with the policy. And the attitude at the time is, this is nothing I've done those, but mental health, what that has to do. And so I should say, mental health farmers isn't just male farmers, but predominantly male farmers. But that's changed dramatically in a very short time. So there's working in UCD, there's working with SETU, Charles and all those work we're doing some in Carlow. So it's really refreshing to see that kind of breadth of work that's going on. So we were involved in this program on firm ground, and firm being Irish for farm, in case there's no way to go here. And as Tomas said, it's trying to build on the work that advisors are doing already with farmers to show them to take on kind of how to connect your role, and let's say more about a connector in a second. So before going to that, just to look at the rows in the bottom. It's really interesting that two government departments are funding this project. And as long as I've been involved in policy work with the HSE, but like Healthy Ireland and Staunchcare talks a lot about joint department working. But it's actually very hard to do that kind of work, as I'm sure you well know. So this is one of those projects that has bridged that barrier. So the context, and I won't repeat what Tomas, farmers are high risk and have rich population groups. So the high risk, Tomas spoke at length about the risk of suicide and mental health. They're also at risk for physical health. Rita Smith's work, for example, is highlighting that farmers are significantly more likely to die from chronic diseases, cardiovascular disease, and cancers, and also they're much more risk for safety issues and occupational type injuries. So they're high risk in the sense of their health, and they're also hard to reach. Metaphorically, in the sense that kind of stoicism and resistance to disclosing any kind of vulnerability makes them a difficult group to engage with. And then literally, geographically, sometimes farmers live in remote areas and can be hard to engage with conventional services. Tomas has talked about change to agricultural policy and how that's impacting farmer identity and farmer masculinity. We know that advisors are strategically positioned to support and signpost farmers' relational health, but in the absence of training and guidance, feel prepared to do so. So that sense of the advisors they have a duty, strong sense of duty of care to the farmers they serve. They're really keen to help, but there's a concern that one may say the wrong thing. Once I intervene, where does that intervention stop? There's all these kind of questions and anxieties around having a kind of health connector role. And fourthly, effective solutions should align with farmers' existing resources and consider their occupational and sociocultural context. So of all groups, farmers don't need a kind of off-the-shelf program that's parachuted in. That rarely works. So you need to build on farmers' existing networks of support and try and develop bespoke programs that respond to farmers' particular sociocultural and occupational context. So just to give a bit more of a background, so farmers are named in the National Mental Health Policy and the follow-up action plans. The new action plan is actually being launched next Monday, a webinar. So farmers are identified as a specific at-risk group at policy level. One of the pillars of the National Center Policy Development has been the development of a national training program called Engage. I remember getting a phone call from someone who's a part of Dr. Jack Noel back in about 2018-19 saying, could we do something with Agri advisors similar to Engage, to train type model that would support Agri advisors to have some kind of a health role in supporting farmers. So that's what that came out. And then that led to on firm ground as a kind of one pillar of Engage. We got a Walsh Fellowship PhD studentship to be the researcher on the project, and there was 2 reports. There was a formative evaluation that kind of scoped out the issues and was a focus groups with farmers, advisors, farmers, significant others, NGOs involved in farming communities, to cover what issues were and how a training program could be crafted that would respond to those needs. And there's 4 academic papers on those as well. This is more broadly, just by way of context, like some kind of broad principles about how to effectively engage. Again, how men being the majority of farmers. Finding the hook is really important. One of the first programs I was involved in was at the Larkin Centre in Dublin's inner city, and they had football as the hook, the linked with Celtic, and they thought this was going to be a huge draw, which it was to a degree. But what turned out to be the main draw was the cookery class. And that's what brought them in. They absolutely loved it. So sometimes, like, we assume we know what men want, we might just work out relaxing them. Richard, many community settings, Farmers of Hearts project, working with farmers in marts and co-ops, and engage farmers in their own space is really important. Focus on doing, so we know from men sheds work that men, might be very shy of resting when you're involved in health, but by doing and engaging activities that works. Connecting masculine ideas, autonomy, control, resilience, and being healthy. So we developed a Staying Fit for Farming booklet that was in our Farmers Journal a few years ago. And we tried to appeal to farmers that what is more important in terms of your livelihood than your health. If your health is compromised, your livelihood is compromised. So make that really clear. And using testimonials to encourage other men to take ownership of their health. When the Irish Heart Foundation went into the marts first, there was a real significant problem. One farmer went, he put in another farmer, and all of a sudden there was fumes. So like that word of mouth testimonials from other men is really important. And then other, like that camaraderie fun is really important. And as Tomas said, we need to focus on trying to change behaviours at an individual level, but in the context of structural problems and determinants of health. So unit on firm ground then became a unit of Engage. And just the other background work, that's the Staying Fit for Farming booklet, and the Farmers of Hearts cardiovascular program. So that's Diana Van Doren's work. And then at a policy level, farmers have been included in other reports that are not specific to farmers, but farmers represent an at-risk group within that. So the aim of firm ground is to equip frontline agricultural advisors with the knowledge, skills, and competencies to engage and signpost farmers with health issues, and to mainstream a health promotion focus into routine farm extension activities. So there were 2 kind of aspects to it. One was the kind of what we call a connector role. So it is to identify farmers who are in bother and distress, and have some kind of intervention that would support them to go get available help and support. And the other was more kind of a broader role, kind of prompt or nudge or cajole or encourage farmers to be more proactive in relation to their health. 2 discussion groups, 2 other engagement activities that advisors will be involved with. And this is the program. And again, Carlow's work, the formative evaluation study 1 was instrumental in shaping this. So there are kind of 3 elements to the program. First 3 points is talking about farmers, getting an understanding of farming identity, farming masculinities, why we need to engage farmers in relation to their health, and so on. Then the next section, the next 4, is looking at the role of advisors, what kind of strengths and advantages do they have to engage farmers, how how to recognise signs of distress in farmers, how to respond to farmers in distress, mainstreaming farmers' health in the context of extension. And then the last part, which kind of came up really at the pilot phase of the program, was self-care for the advisors themselves. So how do they get support, or where can they get support if they experience farming severe distress, say found suicidal. So that's really important as well. Just to give you a flavour of some of the kind of the narratives that inform the case studies and the videos and the other resources that were part of the training. I would say the old perception of we are healthy, we are men, and we are okay, we don't have problems. That's the perception. For many people, it's not in their generation to talk about things. As you know yourself, if you live in a small area, word will get around about things very quickly. So that fear of being exposed for having mental health issue, what would the neighbours say, and what would so and so say, really strong. So Carlow's work generated a lot of kind of rich quotes and data that informs. The training is very experiential, and lots of kind of role plays and case studies, and works really well. And just we found these next two slides have emerged after the pilot delivery of the personal playground training. Advisors were very black and white. They wanted to know, like, what is my role, where does it stop, and what's not my role. So we hope with this, it's a chance to broaden understanding of the health challenges facing farmers. It's an opportunity to learn with and from others in your field and create a community of practice. And this is being expanded now because I'm trying to is part of the advice in the first phase, and it's now looking at vets and other agricultural professionals to broaden the range of professionals who might potentially make an intervention with farmer. And also that there will be kind of collective buy-in. So if you take your average village or small town, that the vets and the co-op owners and the advisors will all have some kind of connection or communication between themselves. People kind of watch for eye. So that kind of community of practice notion is really important. It's great to learn more about normalising having conversations with farmers. So that doesn't mean about nudging and joling and like it's International Men's Day next week. It might be there's a discussion group session going on. Might be an opportunity to name it, like what help, we get someone to talk, that kind of thing. A framework to help navigate intervening with farmers distress, and a source of information support and support services and organisations. Originally, we'd hoped to get a kind of a regional list of services and supports that are available. It's a very difficult thing to do because not all services are recognised by the HSE or so we avoid that. So we kind of kept that to national. More importantly, what the training is not, it's not a panacea to solve all health issues facing farmers. Jens Moss mentioned this, like it's not going to solve everything. It's one like element of a range of interventions that are needed, and technology that's kind of structural determinants of farmers' health as well. It's not a new service for farmers, it's just a training program. It's not a guide to having the perfect conversation with farmers about their health. But this just took a lot of work, because there was a perception that there was an ideal intervention. So we tried to get away from that and to say that intervene and do your best, and even if it's awkward and clumsy and you're not sure about it, you're still intervening, you're still going to make a difference. And I tend to make you into a health professional. So again, this is one thing I'm really concerned about. And again, in the concept of Tomas' last point there, it's a question of navigating that point in a continuum that advisors are prepared to go as far as without tipping over the edge in terms of them assuming too much responsibility or feeling ill-equipped in that role. And it's not a suicide prevention program, so it's not a safe job. It's a program designed to equip agricultural professionals with some skills to support farmers out and to try and post them in their distress. again, just for clarity, we spell out, what the implemental role is and what it is now. This is just one small piece of the training program. It's encouraging advisors to be all ears when it comes to spotting a farmer in distress. So ears refers to engage. So don't start turning your back and pretend you didn't see an issue. If you see a farmer in distress, do your best to engage with it. Ask how they are. You don't see them yourself. Acknowledge. So just listen, be compassionate, empathize. Don't make assumptions or judge. Just be listening ear for the person that's in distress. Reassure them that it can be normal to feel this way. There's help available. You can get through this. Encourage action. And then signpost to appropriate services, whether it's GP, mental health services, or in extreme circumstances. So we spent a lot of time on this. There's 2 videos where an advisor makes like a very difficult plan and challenges with that, more meaningful plans that engages. And then their own self-care as well is really important. And the Men's Level Network is tasked with kind of coordinating the role on firm ground. So these numbers are available for advisors if they wish to seek follow-up support. Nearly there. So the study 2 then looked at the impact of the training on advisors, knowledge, capacity, and willingness to aid farmers in distress. And there were 3 time points: pre-training, post-training, and 6 months. And overall, there were significant improvements in all measures from pre to post, and some declined into 6 months, but still significantly higher than pre. So currently, then the program is being adapted slightly for vets. The focus of the last 6 or 9 months has been targeting vets, both community vets and department vets. But also keeping the door open for advisors who get picked up on the initial role of training. And the next phase is to broaden out still further to finance, agribusiness, farming NGOs, advocates, and to strengthen that kind of community of practice approach to mental health, suicide prevention, and farmers. And as Tomas mentioned already, our role in the Farming Minds project is to build on the learnings from on firm ground that we to kind of integrate and align those with the work that's going to be part of farm ground in developing prevention with private farmers and the advisors. And again, I think we deserve a bit of credit for, very often institutions can work away in silos and like that's some of the way funding works, the kind of competitiveness. So I think it is somewhat commendable that we're trying to line our ducks in a row and try and learn from each other's work. So that's a very good tool. Thank you very much.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much, Noel, and thanks very much, Tomas. So I'm sure there's probably lots of questions on this because as you were going through this slide, I was thinking about actually my role in a similar way as you kind of were talking about the advisor, that you come up with these types of situations with students and you're not really sure how to deal with them and stuff like that. So really we need one of these programs ourselves. And it comes up with EDI. So we do the training with EDI for the students, and sometimes you don't always feel that you have enough knowledge and stuff like that. So I just have one question, but if anybody else has a question you want to ask, raise your hand, please do. Anyone online, if you have a question, you can either raise your hand, or I'm pretty sure they can also be heard if you want to voice a question. So whichever you prefer. So I might just start first. No, I just wanted to ask you about the kind of, when you looked at the advisors and fall off of knowledge, kind of post 6 months, those knowledge, capacity, and I can't remember your third metric that you were using. But does that kind of indicate to you that this type of knowledge or reminders, we need to be doing it kind of on a consistent basis?
So with the engage program, we've developed kind of a mentorship element to it, and I suppose an element of continuing professional development. So those tasks with delivering engage meet twice a year, normally in person, and there's kind of a bit of personal development involved in this. We catch our kind of challenges and other problems that might come up. So there's that kind of support that's in place. And then that also accounts for, say, someone who's maybe fallen off, hasn't delivered training in 2 years, they can come back in and shadow more prone to experienced facilitator. So that's a really important point, I think, to raise. You know, that there's that when the training finishes, that shouldn't be the end of the support that's provided for those tasks for delivering the training. And ongoing, and the same as advisors, you know, that they would receive some kind of ongoing support for the work that they're doing.
Yeah, and how well received was it by the advisors? Because obviously their role is so broad. They're talking to farmers about, you know, applications and for schemes and all sorts of breeding and the environment.
I think of course, we kind of did up in Portage with private advisors, and I thought we were going to get even live in it. And I could understand if we were, but they were genuinely really that I used the term duty of care, but I wouldn't use that lightly. You know, there seems to be such a strong relationship between the advisor and the farmer. I can't generalize it, but overall, so there was a genuine desire to learn new skills that would support them in the role in guiding. And almost every advisor had some experience in the past of having engaged the farmer most in distress, and particularly in more recent years, all the changes that Tomas was working.
Yeah.
So, but then they were very specific and direct about what would work.
Okay.
So it was a real in-action research project. You know, we kept that refined and advisors are very straight talkers in my experience. You know, they would say that will work, that won't work.
Yeah.
But in order for it to be a meaningful impact in the longer term, we need to consider that kind of supports that those ongoing supports that you talked about.
Yeah. No, it's just kind of striking when you saw the post 6 months piece. Yeah, sorry. Three. So who wants to go first? Monica, do you go first?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm just interested in some of the work that Connor did on kind of masculinity and some of the work you mentioned there. And I'm just curious as to like the insights from that work in kind of practical terms, how it fed into intervention. So, informed by that, what did you do that you mightn't have done otherwise or whatever? So, just kind of having that really very detailed understanding of men's identities and their masculinities.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the critical thing was that element of training provided the advisors with a kind of a language to articulate something that they had felt and understood for a long time, but didn't really have the capacity to discuss or articulate it. You know what I mean? And I'd say that also there's a few kind of light bulb moments, or that makes sense. When we talk about, say, farmers' rights to take help and working all the hours, and and then never putting their bodies on the line, and all that kind of stuff. That kind of very traditional notion of masculinity, and that's very fluid and dynamic. But like that section of the training generated a lot of discussion and like a lot of experiences that advisors in the room could share with each other, were examples of masculine interaction. And this was for female, male farmers and advisors. Because it was really interesting how some of the folks were female farmers and there's thousands of male farmers. And they talked as well about embodying that masculinity, feeling guilty for taking an hour off to go and get your hair done or something. That's maybe it's not the best example, it's probably cyclists. But do you know what I mean? So women were expected to demonstrate masculine prowess just as much as males were. So for the long answer, but it gave the advisors language that helped them understand something that was at the core of their interactions with farmers over a long period of time. And I would say that without overstretching it, that in some cases it's kind of like a light bulb moment. Something that really makes sense.
Thanks.
Yeah, I was going to ask Tomas about the what project, and particularly, that idea of farmers feeling that their voice is not heard in policy, and that's EPA are funding this particular research. In many ways, it is the farm organisations who are often the voice of, supposedly anyway, the voice of farmers in a lot of policy negotiation, and by its nature has been political and confrontational. Is there any kind of discussion of that? Representation versus participation versus engagement, particularly where we have a system that is so, farming organisations, their bread and butter is lobbying hard on stuff and fighting over stuff and complaining about what's happening in policy. So to what extent is that feeding into the kind of sense of disempowerment?
Yeah, that definitely came up in the key informant interviews again, just about, we didn't delve too much into in terms of where they're having those conversations or the representation, but just farmers feeling that again, it's like across the board, it's true. Organizations are within the department, maybe they're feeling that their voice isn't being heard adequately. So within this project, the farm lobbies are going to be incorporated. That we're going to see where is the, to figure out where is the message not getting through. Is it from farmers to the farm lobby groups to the department, or where is the problem? Who's not understanding the needs and emotions best?
Yes.
So that is very important that they're there.
Two questions, sorry. Well, first off, this is all new to me, so it's pretty fascinating. But I suppose we do know from other cohorts of the population that there can be quite strong links between improvement of mental health and well-being and experiences of greenness in nature and things like that. And obviously farmers are a cohort that have that at their fingertips, but yet we have this kind of chronic problem in this area. So I'm wondering what the disconnect is that simply a phenomenon for people in urban environments that maybe have limited access to green spaces or to nature, or is it that there is becoming an increasing disconnect between farming and nature? And I'm struck by a quote from one of the farmers that was involved in the pollinator EIP in Kildare. It was like, get down from the tractor and actually look at what's happening, for example. So maybe it's more that, maybe it's an issue with farmers getting more disconnected from the nature. That's right. Possibly not something you've looked into at all, but I just struck me as interesting in this context.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you say that, because one of the techniques that we can use with acceptance therapy is to actually get farmers to take a second to look at what's around them, look at the grass, look at the livestock, look at the hedgerows, to really get them to, get back into the situation that they're in the space that they're in. And it does, again, seem to be working when you bring them back to actually what's important for them. The land is important, the environment is important, the farm that they've grown up on, the village is important. So I think there's an element of farmers just being so busy as well, and moving on, that they don't take the time to think about it. So that is, a key part of the training, to try and ground them a bit in terms of the intervention. So it's definitely an excellent big background.
And the second is a very basic question, which might just be my approach to this area, but it's there's a lot of talk around obviously the figures you presented to us are quite stark, but then there's a lot of focus on obviously male farmers, there's an increasing proportion of female farmers. So I'm just wondering, are these kind of figures representative of both when it comes to mental health, representative of both? Is there a gender element to this basically or not?
Yeah, so with the research we did, the female respondents survey was very low, but from the ones that promote the equal responses across gender, age, farm enterprise, the figures were the same in terms of risk suicide and the key stressors.
And in terms of the national population, what's within your findings in the farmer community, male, female, general community, male, female?
Yeah, in terms of gender, yeah.
Okay, similar.
Yeah, those.
Similarly big distance numbers.
the national level is 3 to 4 times.
So 3 to 4 times higher in the general male population.
It's substantial.
Okay,
Questions here, but they can talk there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay, that's fine.
Stop on questions here.
Right, yeah.
I suppose, Tomas, you kind of answered my question, which I had to use. No, maybe the similar things Tomas said that in their data, there's not much evidence to suggest that farm system makes any difference. For farmer mental health, like I kind of bit of the work was out of the other doing. We're looking at nitrate action program changes, and the farmer that were interviewed kind of said maybe not that the mental health, but they were experiencing a lot of stress around policy change. Did you find that advisors, like specialist advisors in yeah, but like with the beef advisor, dairy advisors found, they were saying, well, actually, I had a lot more interaction with parents.
Yeah, there were certain nuances, and it was positive study, so it wouldn't claim to be representative of them, but
Sure.
certainly among dairy farmers, there was huge pressure like on to scale and get into debt, and being one step removed from the practice of farming, becoming more an office job. And yeah, losing that connectivity with the land, the kind of become medical, and I'm not being shown with it, being one step removed. And then in the wider backdrop of global warming and climate change and it seems that it's one of the major causes of it. And then there was folks who would move in the west toward more tillage farming. They talked about poverty really, and about farming concern about poverty. But you can be left to one side, passing the scrappy people, so they will describe it. While once like dairy farming equals poverty and debt. So there was kind of a hierarchy of dairy farming. And there was kind of Western riders, so farmers, mixed farmers and tillage farmers.
It's kind of interesting, the concept section there coming up. So Brian, I'm actually looking at water quality and policy change, but this theme of societal pressure actually came up very strongly in our farmers interviews without ever really, we didn't set out to probe that initially, but it did come out fairly strongly from the farming. And actually some of the concepts that you spoke about, even the self-care, Darren and I did a piece of work around compliance and pesticide usage. That was really, we didn't intend to look at. And it was more around how do they get rid of their pesticides and do they comply with the regulations. But actually one of their biggest non-compliances was around the wearing the PPE. So again, self-care, just the physical health of the farmers themselves. So like I suppose that there are themes that you mentioned here today that actually probably come up in lots of our years of research that we might not necessarily define as mental health, but they all kind of probably link or match some of the
It's one area that's kind of slipped under the radar. The advisors, most advisors have come across some crisis situation, let's say, at some stage of their careers, advisors. But there's very little talked about it or very formal support to the available. And most advisors would really themselves in that. So
yeah. Do you think, Tomas, we should work with Macra that's changing now? That hopefully our next generation of farmers that speaking about, gratitude journaling or, all sorts of techniques that will become more of a norm, or is that hope?
Yeah, I think so. There's definitely a lot more awareness than even Mockery to make the move program. It's getting called when you've talks to groups of young farmers. So there's definitely a need there. And young farmers are more keen to talk about it and engage with it. So I assume that hopefully that's a good sign and that things will change in the future.
Okay. Do you have any other questions or we can all either chat?
really interesting question.
Okay, well, without further ado, we'll wrap it up and say thanks very much to you both for giving us your time and for sharing your results with us. And we're delighted to have you here. And thank you.
And related of climate and having it part-time, or having off part full-time jobs, part-time jobs. May also be